Hello everyone and welcome to the KneeDown podcast. Today is the Sachsenring Day. That's right, of course. We're doing the podcast straight after the Grand Prix of Germany. And I am joined with a very good, close personal friend of mine, Craig Dickinson, former South African champion. Now, Craig, we've got quite a bit to talk about today. But first and foremost, how are you, mate? How's things?
Yeah, good. It's a little bit hot, as I think we both are. It's not often you get to say that being in England. But yeah, no, good. I mean, the Moto3 and the Moto2 races were really good, and the GP race was interesting at points, but kind of predictable and a little bit boring, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll touch base upon that in a minute because first and foremost, you've been away for the last couple of weeks, and I have missed you in the podcasts, and I'm sure the viewers have as well. But shout out to your team, the IUM Motorsports team. Shout out Tibor Varga and Declan from Rosmarlen. Of course, been in the podcast before as Declan, and yeah, they've had some very interesting times recently. So I just want to give them a heartfelt shout out from two great people.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm sure they'll appreciate it as well.
I hope so. But let's talk business, Craig. That's why we're here, aren't we? We witnessed a Marquez annihilation in Germany. No one came close, and I'd argue that it's one of his strongest races of his career. What do you reckon, mate?
Yeah, and I think you have to go back to basically the start of the weekend. He only ever looked to be looking for the race. He spent every opportunity he could understanding the medium tires. He went out in the practice session that's for the time qualifying, set an early good lap on the softs, and then went straight back to the mediums and just carried on investigating. So yeah, his race pace was phenomenal. And I think that may even be the closest we've come this year to seeing Mark at his maximum potential. I don't think he was at 100%. But I think that's as close as we've seen him this year for sure. And yeah, God help the rest of them if that's what's to come.
My comparison was this whilst I was sitting there watching today, and it was unfortunately not the most interesting races. It was in certain areas, but watching Marquez was like 2019 Marquez again. I really felt that, oh no, we're back to this, which is great if you're a Marquez fan, but for the neutrals, I want to see some more action. But you hit the nail on the head. A lot of conversation about this time. Of course, I made even a KneeDown post about this as well, talking about the top 10 who went to Q2. That lap that Marquez set was so early on in the practice that he didn't even need to do the softs again to get into qualifying too. And when you have such an ability and such an advantage, you can spend all that time in your racecraft, which clearly, as you said, was paramount today, and just managing that gap. No one came close as we saw, but looked like Didier and Bez, at the beginning they might have been within a second, and then of course Mark was like, no, I've got this under control, no problemo.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and really important in understanding, I think, maybe just to hazard a guess, but what a lot of people didn't understand was how that front tire was going to be towards the end of the race. And it caught a lot of riders out because a lot of them, what they'll tend to do is they'll go out, they'll do 8 laps, then come into the box, make a change, maybe change tires or go back out in the same tire. But that's not the persistent laps that you would do in a race. So you do get a slight change in condition to the tire. So the tire cools down a little bit, then it reheats up. It's a chemical reaction. It's not the same as it's going to be in the race. So yeah, Mark just got all of that groundwork done. And it's not the first time that he's done it. He's done it once or twice before. And part of it as well is to save another set of the softs because obviously they have an allocation. So save a soft for qualifying to go, but then obviously the quali was wet through, so didn't really pay off.
He didn't need it anyway. He still qualified in pole position, still managed to
Yeah,
do just as fine. But what I was curious about
yeah,
today, because obviously I was texting you while we were watching the race, and it did start to spit a little bit just after the Moto2 Grand Prix. So I was thinking, wonder if, of course, if what's buts and maybes, of course it is, but wonder if it would have been different if it was in the rain. But Marquez is so superior in the rain, so not sure if we would have seen
yeah.
a difference today.
I think it might have been closer in the sense that Zarco's phenomenal in the wet, and Bez as well was really strong in the wet. So maybe it would have been different people fighting with Mark and brought a different element to it with Mark. But I think even in the rain, he had just that little bit extra above everyone else. Barring Digi's out of the blue lap, whenever anyone went quicker than Mark, he went quicker again and again. So he just always had more in the tank. I think the results still would have been the same, but maybe the way they got there would have changed a bit.
And with the Sachsenring being a left-handed dominant track, 9 left-handers, 4 right-handers, if I'm not mistaken. Mark is obviously superior on the left-hand side. Do you think there's more to it than just that? Or is that just the benefit and it works so well to Marquez? Because this is not his first rodeo. It's 12 wins now at the Sachsenring, 9 in MotoGP. So is it just the left-handers or do you think there's more to it?
Um, oh, he is phenomenal in left-handers. There's no doubt in that, and I think people are slowly starting to understand why. In particular, it was mentioned on the broadcast that what he's doing is he's leaning the bike over in sort of from corner entry to the apex a little bit more than everyone else. And what that then allows him to do is very similar to what Pedrosa did on the Honda, is pick the bike up really quickly and squirt it out of the corners, just maximizing tire life from there as well, because you're not spinning the rear on the side. So yeah, and there was sort of an interesting comment made after saying that was, well, if that's what he's doing, why doesn't everyone else do it? And it's like, well, if everyone else could do it, Mark wouldn't be the rider that he is, and it's
Exactly,
very
yeah.
different between knowing and replicating.
I wrote the same thing down exactly that point because we had an onboard footage at the end of the sprint in yesterday's Saturday, and it was perfect. Out the Queckenberg, the final corner, Mark was picking the bike up before Bez was picking the bike up, and he was towards the curb, almost fighting the Aprilia to get into the straight. And Marquez was already straight, and I knew then that this is it, because if Marquez gets through turn one, very very slim chance of Bez responding. It's just too difficult to pass him. But this is also what Pecco and Martin have been doing with the Ducati for the past 2 years. They had that superiority to just get the bike sat up and fired out the corner. The rear device on that Ducati is insane compared to the rest of them. It squats and it's flawless. Where the other bikes, they squat and they struggle, they spin. Fabio's Quattrararo's M1 is particularly bad for this, where it squats and then he sort of struggles. But you absolutely hit the nail on the head there, coming out of that final corner. With that corner and probably going into the Ralph Waldrum curve, the downhill waterfall,
Yeah, yeah.
if you can also get it there, you're going to squirt out as well. So I think it was paramount in Sector 3 where he was destroying Bez's
Yeah.
sector times.
Yeah, and the last sector as well. I mean, up until the fast laps started to come in when people had newer tires and had the grip, no one was close to Mark in the last sector. Everyone could be within reach and then 2-3 tenths down by the line. And yeah, you're right that the right-hander down the waterfall is such an important corner, even though the track's not very long, but it's a fast corner through it, and you're almost not turning through it. As soon as you're turning in, you're trying to get it stood back up to maximize the drive out of it. And Mark seems to be able to do that better than anyone else at the moment. Whether that's him or the Ducati remains to be seen, but I would say it's probably both, because otherwise Digi and Bez would be there as well.
Yeah, true, true.
Digi and Pecco would be there as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I really felt that Alex Marquez was nailing Sector 3 extremely well. He was also catching up to Bez during the Grand Prix. But yeah, as you say, Pecco and Digia as well. Digia did a lot better this weekend than Pecco did. I don't think Pecco really looked comfortable at any point.
Yeah, or just sort of, I mean, I think on Thursday he was kind of there or thereabouts. Friday, ah, yeah, Friday. Sorry, I'm thinking
Friday,
I'm
Saturday.
at thinking I'm at Junior GP or ESBK. Yeah, so Friday he was there or thereabouts, and then on Saturday the rain came, and if you notice with him, he pitted on his outlap immediately and changed rear tire. I think he then did another lap, so he went from soft to medium, did a lap on the medium, pitted for the soft again, like almost immediately. So he was indecisive from word go. And yeah, from there just was on the back foot for quali and started P11. And what are you going to do around the Sachsenring from P11?
Not a lot you
Well,
can do.
he got third, but you're already fighting with one hand behind your back. It doesn't make your life easy.
So, from my understanding, the big difference maker in the Aragon test and Aragon itself and Mugello was a larger brake disc for Pecco. Now, I'm not too sure if this was eligible here in the Sachsenring, but I've noticed when he has it, there's a lot more life in Pecco. When it's not there, it's the guessing game again. Do you know if it is
Yeah.
there in Sachsenring? Is he allowed to use that?
I'm sure Brembo will have their suggestions, but as we've seen, I think in Austria, teams will go whichever way they want to go. Brembo told Yamaha not to run a certain size disc, and they did, and Mav infamously launched it into the air fence, and
Was that
that
21?
was, I think so, yeah.
Or
And
20?
everyone sort of said, "Oh, brake failure, blah blah," and Brembo came out and said, "Look, we told them not to run it. This is why we
Yes.
told them not to run it." Yeah, teams will do what they want to do. I did hear as well that Pecco tried a chassis that they had from last year, and said that it didn't work as such for Sachsenring, but it gave him enough information that maybe it's going to work somewhere else at a different tracks. I think under any other circumstances with Mark not being his teammate, this is not a bad year, not a bad start to the year for Pecco. In fact, it's his best start riding for the factory Ducati team to a year,
Which is
believe
crazy.
it or not. Yeah. But I think having Mark as a teammate and Mark doing what he's doing, you start to question everything and start to change everything because it's, okay, let me look at his data. Well, his bike's sliding more than mine, but he's riding through it. His bike's losing the front more than mine, but he's riding through it. I got no more excuses anymore. Like, this guy's riding through every problem I have, and it's worse for him. How do you, yeah, it's pretty much turned from, Ducati saying, no, we need to do everything for Pecco. Pecco, we need to be behind him. We need to support him, give him everything, to them now basically being like, what else do you need? Like, what else can we give you?
Yeah, because on the other side, on the other side, if Mark wasn't his teammate, Mark wasn't in the picture, he would be behind Alex Marquez. So I still think there's a lot of call to concern for Ducati and Pecco's side. I don't think they can be satisfied until they secure second comfortably ahead of Alex.
Yeah.
Whether
And that
chassis changes,
points,
brake discs, maybe
that
change.
points difference is really significant now between Alex and Pecco. And look, it's all ifs, buts and maybes, and they don't exist in racing, unfortunately, but it would be a different circumstance for Pecco, a different level of pressure in that I don't think he would be scratching his head right now. I think he'd just sort of be saying, yeah, I've got some stuff to work on, but we'll be there. We've been here before for the last 2 years and I came strong. So yeah, I think he's sort of at that point now, just it's going to turn around at some point, and sort of waiting for that. But when Mark's your teammate, you don't have that luxury anymore.
Unfortunately, he's 10 rounds too late for a turnaround at this point. I mean, we will get to the championship implications later on, but it's not looking too great at the moment for Pecco, I
No,
would say.
no, it's not far off writing him off. I mean, to be fair, it's not far off writing everyone off except Mark.
Yeah,
But this is racing. You're only one unusual crash away from missing a few rounds, as we've seen
very
with
true.
with Martin and the
And
rest.
Mark himself, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
So
exactly.
before we dive into that side of things, I've got a bit of a structure here that I would like to move on to next. So I looked at today's finish. Of course, I watched the entire Grand Prix. I didn't particularly enjoy it compared to some of the other Grand Prix, and I wrote a lot of notes down. I was sort of thinking about things for this podcast and for future videos. And one of the commentators, I think it might have been Lewis Sotheby, said, if you told me that this was I think it might have been Matt Bird, it doesn't really matter, but he was basically saying that if you told me on paper this was going to be the podium finish of this race, you wouldn't bat an eyelid. You would think, fair enough. It's been the
Yeah.
same situation we've seen all year. Mark superior, Alex in second, Pecco struggled to get third. But unveiling that and really going into it, you realise that that is not the podium that we should have had today.
No, not at
Far
all.
from it.
Yeah.
So, talking about Alex Marquez and Paco Bagnaia on the podium is, yeah, fair enough. But let's talk about those people who could have been or should have been on the podium. I think first we've got to start with Fabio Di Giannantonio. He looked excellent out there today, and I will pick your brains for this because I'm thinking potential cold tear on the right hand side or something on the lines of that. That's why I need your expertise, Craig. What happened to Digia? What happened to Bez? What happened to Zarco? What happened to Mir and Agura? All in turn one on the right hand side of the tyre.
Yeah. I mean, so you have to think, and you made the point, there's three or four right-handers and nine left-handers, I think you said. So then think of the layout. So turn one is your first right-hander, then you have a left, then you have a double right-hander following it. Then you're not on the right-hand side of the tire until the waterfall. And through the waterfall, you don't, it's not like a push the front, generate heat in the right-hand side because you're upright super quick and it's not, a long turn, let's say. So essentially from turn three, depending on how you count the corners, but from 3 and 4, you're not turning right again until turn 1. So the whole way around the rest of the lap, the right hand side of the tire is cooling down. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is as you approach it, you go uphill. And as you go uphill, the front loads. Then you come downhill, the front offloads, and then you're still braking and the front reloads. So it's like so much pressure like that into the turn in the front shocks. And then all of a sudden you got to turn and lean. The tire's not fully warm. The suspension is maybe not set in a way for it to grip, like to dig the front in, and that's what happens. Or in Zarco's case, as he rolled on the throttle, offloaded the front, went up like that, and washed out. In the
Same as
others, it
Pecco's crash
was
a few years ago.
yeah, exactly. And the others, because the other aspect is yes, you're going downhill from the little kicker, but as you get into the turn, it dips down as well. So it's a really, really difficult corner. And yeah, it just catches a lot of people out. There's always crashes in that turn, however many times they come. I don't think I've ever seen it like that though in a race. Um, and yeah, it must warrant an investigation at least. Maybe not on like a serious kind of, something was amiss, but to have it happen that consistently in such a short space of time warrants kind of looking into, like, were all of the riders maybe just a little bit deeper than they were, or were they all doing the same thing? And like you say, it's a cold tear on the right hand side of the tire. But yeah, it's all front end crashes and it's all in the same turn. And it was like what, 6 or 7 riders who fell as a result of it. Mir, you can't really count because he was
You have
washed
to
out
count.
by Agura. But yeah, within 2 laps, I think it was. And then nothing after that. Like everybody suddenly
Woke up.
everyone decided, oh, actually, yeah, I'm going to brake a little bit earlier and not as aggressively. Or I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of factors as a rider going into that corner. And then there's a lot of factors from the suspension and the bike setup going into that turn. I don't think it's rider error for it to happen to that many so consecutively, so consistently.
From a rider's perspective, going into a corner where the tyre is a little bit colder, you're downhill, you're a little bit off camber, you're reeling in. How does the feeling of a cold tyre feel in that sense of. Is it just a complete lack of feeling, like there's no grip on the sole of your shoe, for example? How would you describe it?
So it's a strange thing because some of it is also psychological. So it depends on, I mean, at their level, I wouldn't say it's psychological, but in kind of like a intermediate getting to their level, if you've had a couple bad experiences with a cold tire, you're immediately going to think, need to ride a bit gingerly here. But essentially all it is that, you, you just don't feel like the front end is planted. Like it's not drastically slipping like that, but you don't feel confident to carry the same lean angle and to carry the same momentum and speed as you would on, a full hot operating window front. And yeah, that's what they say with feeling is the vibrations, the feedback, the sensation that you're getting through the handlebars. Um, whether that is just sort of doing that a little bit. It's not the drastic, that's when you've crashed already. It's too late for that, but it's sort of those little, almost like, if you were to go and ride on ice, you're doing that, right? Because you're trying to find traction to keep momentum. And that's essentially the same thing, except you're just slightly lent over.
All of the crashes, probably all of them, apart from the Iagora one, because I think he knew he made a mistake. But Bez's reaction, Digi's reaction, Marco's was the one that caught me off guard because it was almost identical to Pecco Bagnaia in 2022, and I just thought, wow, that's a point where they must be on the absolute thinnest of limits, where it's just gone over that limit and it's just crashed, and it really doesn't feel like the punishment suits the crime in that regard for such a small corner, because you look at turn 6, turn 7, the left hander that really leans you in. That's downhill, and they're absolutely sending it towards the apex, and it looks phenomenal on camera. But again, that looks more dangerous than turn 1. But because of the nature of the cold tyre and the nature of, as you say, the braking. Look at Marquez under the braking there. The rear tyre's going up. Did you see the clip of Fabio where the rear tyre was up in the air,
Yeah, no,
slamming on the
that was
brakes?
like, it made me think, oh, Toprak's going to get on well with this Yamaha. No, that was a proper, bum clencher of a moment. Yeah, it's scary because to get the rear back down, you have to release the front brake, but that first turn is coming very quickly. And yeah, to have the mental capacity to release the brake with enough time to then reapply it, but not too aggressively. And yeah, he didn't fully make the apex, but he didn't run into the gravel either. So yeah, fair play to him for that.
Pretty impressive. But one thing we didn't actually talk about is Pedro Acosta's crash. That was just before the Omega corner, the turn 3 leaning into turn 2 leaning into the right hander. He went really early in the left hander.
Yeah. And so this is another thing, is that every movement you make on a bike, especially in a turn at lean angle, is gonna have some impact on the way that the bike reacts to it. You can't just, and it may be something you do subconsciously as well. But let's just say, for instance, that Pedro goes through the left, rolls off a little bit because he's gone in too hot to then switch right. That motion of rolling off unsettles the front and the rear. So then, you know, you're setting the bike up to go through it at kind of at the maximum, should we say, and all of a sudden you've rolled off a little bit and the bike responds, comes out and then washes because of the momentum. Like it's set up to dig in, not to sort of release kind of thing. Probably not doing the best of jobs of explaining it, but
I'm
yeah.
getting there. I'm definitely understanding it because it was a very strange crash compared to what with others we saw. The Morbidelli one, which I guess we'll get to the moment, which is really horrific, but that was not nice for Pedro because it didn't look like that's a spot where anyone should be crashing because it's just a gradual turn. And over the past, 15, 16, 17 years I've been watching MotoGP, I've never seen a crash there, to my knowledge, unless it was a collision.
Uh, John Hopkins had one of the biggest high sides I've ever seen.
In turn
Um,
2.
yeah, as he came through the left, high sided basically the exact same spot as Pedro, but was a high side rather than
Did Pedrosa do this
front
too?
end. I don't know if Pedrosa was there, but could be. It is one of those corners where if you just ask for a little bit too much too soon, it can happen. Um, so yeah, even more so surprising to see Pedro just wash out on the front,
Yeah.
because if you're going to have a crash based on form in that corner, it's not that type of crash.
That's what caught me off guard by so much. And the only left-handed crashes of the MotoGP class was that one and
Yeah,
Morbidelli's in the wet. But excuse
yeah,
that because it was the wet conditions. But Frankie's crash just was a bit of a bizarre one because obviously, unfortunately for Frankie, he's now lost out on any points this weekend. But he went rapidly, and it didn't look like he did anything particularly wrong. He just sort of hit the brakes, and the bike just gone.
yeah.
It was a mean
So
old crash.
it's it's really bizarre because you have some circuits where Frankie crashed because he hit the white paint.
We
Um,
did hit the white line. Yeah,
yeah,
I missed it. I couldn't see it.
and it's really bizarre because some circuits have grippy paint, which sounds bizarre.
I
Paint's
have heard
paint.
this.
Yeah, but some circuits have grippy paint where you can look, you're not going to push in the wet like you would on the dry, but you can get away with a little bit more. Sachsenring does not have the grippy paint. It's brutal. And I think you saw it quite a lot in the wet when riders were out of the white lines. There were a lot of moments. So yeah, Frankie, and at that point, I'm sure from playing the game, you know how fast and committed you have to be into that left-hander. Because straight after it, you have all the momentum to carry yourself up the hill. So you
Very
really
important
have
corner.
to, yeah, really have to be, on point into that turn and go at it with a lot of speed. And if you crash as early as he did, yeah, the momentum will take you. And yeah, the gravel nowadays is really deep. And what happens is the bike or the rider tend to they just have to dig in with one limb or one component of the bike, digs in and yeah, there you saw Frankie doing that. And normally it's the bike that does that. There's no kind of small soft crashes anymore once it reaches the gravel at speed.
Yeah, it was a rough one to watch. I know Maverick had quite a bad one as well for the same reason. Touched the white line coming onto where Diogo crashed, which we'll talk about in a bit. Yeah, just a really really scary couple of crashes this weekend, and I think that's why I now want to sort of move back to the fact that Bez and Digia, who were in the podium positions, which looked like second place there was a curse on or something, but those positions there with crashes like that, do you think it should knock or mar the confidence of both Bez and Digia, or do you think it's a case of, you know what, little mistake, it can happen, bounce back next week?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's something I've been thinking a lot of, funnily, recently, is you just don't have that mindset as a rider. And if you do, then it's probably time to hang the suit up, put the helmet on a stand somewhere, because you just can't afford to let it do something. The ones that are strange are the ones that the crashes you can't explain, where there's no data to suggest anything, and that's not so much your confidence is rocked, but you just have no understanding. And so you don't know how to overcome that, in a sense of, if you know what you did wrong, you can fix it. But if you don't know where to start. So I think, yeah, so long as they know what they did, and you'll probably find in the data they held the brake a little bit too long, or they got off the brake a little bit too early, or they applied too much brake pressure into the turn. So it'd be something as simple as that, or even, as you said, Michelin will say, look, we we didn't anticipate the wear to be like that, and that's the reason. They'll move on to the next round, and bar any kind of injuries, won't be phased or affected by it.
Yeah, the alien mindset. I guess what you were saying there as well is that humans, we do crave closure, don't we? So having that understanding, that closure that says that, you know what, I ballsed up, that was my fault, but I
Yeah,
won't let it happen again. But
for sure.
regarding their performances, I think they've had a fantastic weekend and should take nothing but positives from it. Because Digi's doing really well. He was at the top fastest in practice. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, Marquez was sandbagging, let's say. but
Yeah, yeah. But no, for sure.
overall,
I
still
mean,
a good performance.
that's the best we've seen from Digi this year. And so weirdly enough, this is around the time Pecco normally gets going. He figures the bike out and starts to make a run. So it's not surprising that Digi is there now. Maybe the Ducati just takes a little bit of time to warm up to and find the direction and the limits of it. Mark obviously is out of that equation because he can ride through and around anything. Um, so I think Digi for sure will take it in stride on to the next one. Bruno is going to be, I think, a good performance for him. Bez has been on superb form as of late. The Aprilia has really been doing well, and yeah, it was a really uh nothing is unfair in racing, but it didn't fit the punishment didn't fit the crime. I don't think it was really unfortunate for Bez, but yeah, he'll go on to the next one and still feel as confident as he was because Mark disappeared, but Bez was still there with Digi and started to close Digi down. Once Mark broke Digi properly, um, Bez started to come back at Digi. And then yeah, Digi crashed and Bez pulled away from Alex. And so yeah, he'll have that confidence for sure into the next round.
I always say in racing, when you get that second advantage, you break the resolve of that other rider in second. And it really felt that way today with Mark. Digi was doing some decent laps. Not far off the high 120s like Mark was doing, but he was closing in, and it really felt like, you know what, maybe there's still a little bit of chance left in this one. But unfortunately, it wasn't the case, and as those tenths turned into seconds, we then got a different outcome entirely. But regarding the other battles, the not podium battles, this one I'm really excited to talk about because the top 10 was all of the riders because it was only 10
Yeah,
riders that
the
finished,
finishes. Yeah.
which is mad to say. I don't think I've seen that or said that in a long, long time. But loved your reaction in the Discord message that we sent earlier and on the KneeDown. One guy we have to give massive praise to, and that is Luca Marini.
Without doubt. I mean, let's put it all out there. He dislocated his hip, he broke his sternum, fractured his shoulder blade, and punctured a lung. Now, the punctured lung is interesting because that's pretty much what Martin did, along with some ribs and other things. So quite similar. But Marini's come back with a couple more injuries, a little bit faster than Martin, and put that performance on. Like he didn't just ride into a top six; he fought his way into it.
And did he fight?
Yeah, impressively. And I mean, that's the best result for the HRC, the factory Honda team since Mark in Thailand, which is massive. This
That's
is what they've
huge.
been building to. And look, let's not forget that Zarco is carrying the torch for the Honda team this year, but super impressive from Marini. And I think I've I've had this discussion many a time with my old man, and it's unbelievable what being out of contract does for a rider. Marini up until the injury had finished every race for Honda. In comparison to Jomir has crashed in half of his HRC Honda races.
To my
Um,
knowledge, sorry, excuse me to butt in, but Luca Marini apparently is still not crashed on the Honda
yeah,
in MotoGP yet this season.
yeah, which is, yeah, highly likely.
He's so good.
A lot of people can say that, yeah, he's taking it easy. He's not pushing to the limit. He's still scoring points.
Get results.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you can learn a lot from finding the limit and going over it, but you learn so much more finishing a race that's 30 laps long. So yeah, and Mir in this account was really unlucky, but Marini had him beat anyway before the incident.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's for me the rider of the day was Marini, and that's not to take anything away from Alex, who equally had a broken left hand, which nowadays in the past when all you had to do was pull the clutch in and out, you could get away with a broken bone in your left hand. Now there is something like anywhere between 9 and 11 toggles, switches, levers, and dials on the left side of the bike, whilst holding on for dear life to this beast that wants to throw you off at any moment with a broken hand. It's remarkable from Alex. And yeah, Mark, you can't not give Mark a rider of the day with the performance he had. So it's a
Yeah,
really difficult one. Yeah. But for me, Marini, but just because of what he came back from, and maybe he, I don't wish it on anyone, but maybe he needs to get injured more often, because when he comes back, he's got his best result he's ever had on the Honda. So
See, the thing is, this takes away from Marquez and it takes away from Alex Marquez, but it's not meant to. What Luca did today was unheard of for him. It was predictable that Marquez was going to win and dominate, and it was quite predictable that Alex Marquez would still be up there, which is not a negative. That just shows the level of talent that we and the level of hierarchy we put those two riders in, the two brothers. But for Luca, he doesn't get credit at any point during the season ever.
yeah,
So
no,
this was so massive. The fact that, as we say, we both laughed about this. Well, not laughed, but we both scoffed at the idea of that he was stretching his right leg through turn 7,
yeah,
through the
yeah,
cramp, the pain, the adrenaline. He's battling
and
riders like Jack Miller. I think it was Oliveira. Brad Binder was in
Brad,
there.
Brad as well. Yeah,
Mia, Ogura, Raul Fernandez wasn't far off. He was
yeah.
he was very busy in that race.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, for 2 laps it was turn 7, and then it was turn 7 and 8 that he still had the leg off
Yeah.
going through it. I mean, just unbelievable. And yeah, I guess that's, down to riding fitness, because he probably hasn't been able to do that much. So yeah, remarkable. And hats off to him. I think that puts for sure the question out of my mind of, is he dedicated enough, or is he just picking up a paycheck? You cannot
Yeah,
question it anymore.
definitely not. Definitely not. And I think yes, there will be people who'll say, well, he only finished there because the people crashed behind him. But think of the amount of people that crashed in that race, and you didn't during a fight with one of the best. I still think one of the most underrated riders in the form of Brad Binder. Granted, the KTM's not great at the minute, and he was the only KTM actually to finish the race. But he was battling with some great talents there: race winners, champions, and podium
Yeah.
finishes. He was doing
Yes,
everything.
Luca Marini of old, but just that went missing, and I think we all sort of said it would on the Honda with the situation at Honda. But yeah, Marini rolled back the years there a little bit. And I, I can understand people would say, well, everyone crashed in front of him. It's easy. I think that's applicable to Alex Rins getting a top 10, because Rins was
Yeah,
anywhere up to 2 seconds a lap slower than Mark. He rode around. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of tongue for him, but he rode around to get points. Maybe he had issues, maybe he had problems, but yeah, he only got 10th because everyone else crashed in front. But for Marini, I turncoat it and say, yeah, well, you have to finish first. First, you must finish.
true, true. But
Yeah.
also as well, from someone who's ridden, I'm guessing, with injuries before, you've got your team that rides with injuries as well. I'm guessing there's also a sense of adrenaline and no time to think about pain when I'm trying to battle like Sir Brad Binder and Jack Miller, and then you can't really think about it, can you? So I guess maybe if Alex Rins' situation, you would be thinking about the pain every lap, every right hander. You're like, oh, that's so sore. I guess in that case, maybe it would have been worse. So it's probably better for Luca to be in this fight.
Yeah, I think they will do like a painkilling injection and before they go out, or maybe a series of them. Um, Pain management will get you so far, and that pain management wears off around the time that the adrenaline wears off. So at some point, you start to feel that pain, and it comes down to your mental toughness of, am I going to pull in here because it's too much? Am I going to roll off and just finish? Or am I going to stick my leg out and try and get on with it? And that's what Marini did, because yeah, it's that showed more than anything how determined he was to ride around the problem. because he could quite easily have just rolled off, come into the pits,
No one would have blamed him.
and no one would have batted an eyelid. He could have just hobbled off the bike into the garage and said, too much too soon, you know? And, no, he found his way around it, and credit to him for doing it.
Do you reckon that's secured him a contract for a future season? That
I mean, what else would you have to do to get it, right? I think there'll be a couple more races to decide on things like that, but it did him no harm at all. That for sure will be very well received in the HRC garage.
it was well received on KneeDown. Let me tell you, I thought
Yeah.
Luca Marini was fantastic. But as you say, not taking anything away from Marquez, not taking anything away from Alex Marquez either, not taking away anything from Fabio from riding the Yamaha and doing everything he can. But I have to give the praise to Luca Marini. But one thing I want to get back to, actually, just to slightly come back round on ourselves, because I've got a whole section dedicated to this and something I want to pick your brains about. We discussed the crashes in turn one, the struggles on the right hand side of the tyre when it gets cold. One thing I want to ask you about is how you could possibly combat those issues with a bike setup, and then I want to ask you something else regarding the safety of the track. So if I could just get your opinion first then about how to set up the bike. So from your experience as a rider, from racing in tracks, even as tight as, I'm guessing Kyle Army is probably crazy on some of the suspension parts of that in that track. What's
Yeah.
it like in a track like this?
So Sachsenring is really difficult because you have really intense heavy braking zones, but then you have corners which you don't really brake, you roll off for and are flowing. So usually you would set a bike up for one or the other, to be really strong on the brakes into turns, or really strong through a turn, carrying the line and the momentum. Very rarely do those two setups like sort of coincide and you can make the perfect bike for all occasions. There is some amount of compromise in all of it. And then you have the rider as well, making the difference in scenarios, how you approach each corner, how you tackle the situation in front of you. The right hand tire, I don't really know if there's anything you can do to set it up other than Michelin supplying an asymmetrical tire that is a little bit softer on one side than the other. Would that help? I don't know. Over 30 laps might be more of a hindrance. I know all of the riders went with a hard front because I have the strangest ears for earbuds. This was not
For
the
those
best
who are
call.
listening, won't even have any
Yeah.
idea. So basically, Craig's earphone fell out again.
Yeah. Second time. Um, and yeah, they all went with a hard tire because of the force generated from the braking zones. So it could be that the hard tire wasn't the tire for the race, but it was the tire for the track. If that sounds a bit kind of wrong, but
No,
it's
I
the
get what
only
you're
way I can,
saying.
yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of factors involved. It's not just purely a case of setting things up and doing things specifically, as every track is. There's always an element of compromise. You can make a bike way too strong in turn one, but then it's useless everywhere else. But let's say, for instance, there's a 3 kilometer straight after turn one, you're probably going to set it up there to gain the time, and just put up with what you'll lose everywhere else. So yeah.
Because not it's every rider has this. It's not just a case of one rider needs to pay attention to this. So even if the worst case scenario, everyone set the bike up similar or the same way, but just as you said earlier, take it gingerly into turn one, or be a little bit more wary that when you're coming down the Ralph Walton curve, that you've got to just run it tighter or run it a little bit more to the side. So I guess everyone has to go through that. So there's no unfair or advantage or disadvantage for everyone.
No, and
It's
it's the same
pure
with
preference on how
with
you would ever do it.
yeah, it's the same with the rain. When it rains, it's exactly the same for everyone. Everyone who's on track at that moment, the conditions are the same. And I will say, when you said that about going ginger, is I think about a lap or two after the series of crashes, I noticed Mark started to take it not easier, but he didn't seem to be attacking turn one.
Yes.
Maybe they were all aware that at some point it was going to happen. Maybe they thought it was going to come later. I'm not too sure. Maybe they thought with there only being four right-hand corners that it wasn't going to be an issue on the right side in terms of tyre wear. We'd have to go to Michelin and to the riders and figure that out. So yeah, if any of them are listening, let us know.
Yeah, I'd love to be privy to that sort of information.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Sachsenring, now a couple of times in the German GP history, the conversation about safety has always risen up in this track, and one of them being the long lap penalty, one of them being the track conditions because of the four right-handers that do get cold, and just the way the nature of the track is. So if you run off, you get back onto the track, it's dangerous to come on. So there's quite a lot to pick out here, so I guess it's up to you which one you want to do first. But I think first and foremost, the long lap penalty loop, that was changed last season. And I recall Oscar Gutierrez tackling that for his double long lap penalty last season, and he crashed in the uphill part of the Queckenberg where the long lap penalty loop is. My question to you is, Craig, where the hell can you put the long lap penalty in the Sachsenring that doesn't impact a return position?
Yeah, this is the difficult part is because it ties in with the safety of the track, right? In that wherever you put it, you're essentially removing the gravel, which is designed to slow a crash down before it reaches the end of the track limits, where the tire fence is or a tire wall or even a concrete wall. So you have to think about where that's going to be. I seem to remember, wasn't it in the first turn they had it
It
at
was,
one
yeah.
point? Yeah. And then the issue is that's where pit lane is. And also, I think maybe they changed that because of the incident with Marquez where Marquez crashed and his crash took Zarco out.
Yes. Yeah, that was
It's,
horrific,
yeah,
that.
yeah, it looked really bad, but thankfully wasn't as bad. Um, and yeah, where it is now, I I think it's one of those tracks where it doesn't matter where you're going to put it, it's going to be the same situation because of how compact that track is on itself. It basically just does this around itself, back to the start line. And I don't know where you could change it. I don't think you could. And I think the problem they have at the moment is because it's such a historic venue, the land around it is no longer available. And so that is as good as it's going to get. Unfortunately, the circuit in terms of they can't extend runway, runoffs. They can't, they can change the long lap to different parts, but it's not really going to make much of a difference. It's the same problem.
Because I saw the long lap penalty from last season. We saw the collision with Marquez and Zarco coming into pit lane. Saw the Oscar Gutierrez drop the bike in Moto E for the new long lap penalty loop, and ever since I've thought that's a horrible position because you have to come across quite wide where a lot of riders are preparing to then swing in. So you'd have to really make it known that you're on the right hand side and you're going to go to the long lap penalty. Whether the riders need to start signalling or something, not sure. But getting back onto the racing line, the riders are sweeping across onto that curb, up the Queckenberg, over the hill, and then gone. But I think you hit the nail on the head from a fan's perspective. It looks really sketchy, but as you said, it's probably not that intense when you're riding because he's on. If you think about it, you're on the left hand side, you're going to come up the hill now. You can see, in this case, Senna Aegis in Moto 2 trying to get out of you're going to move your bike just not so far over to the curb. You're going to allow him to position himself. But it always looks sketchy. It even looked sketchy when Alvaro Carpe did it too. So, do you think it's the best place for it, or?
I just thought then it probably is the best place for it, and maybe what they need to do is extend extend it in a way that it's not making more of the long lap, although I think it's a really probably the
It's
shortest long
really
lap
short, yeah.
penalty. Yeah. But maybe run it alongside the outer curve. And so
And
you
join.
rejoin yeah, in a straight line, and that way people have opportunity to avoid you. The issue I can see with where you rejoin now is that riders will be going into a turn like that, not looking or paying attention to what's here. And if a rider then is all of a sudden, oh, I got nowhere to go at that point in time. Whereas at least if they're already going down the straight, you have plenty time
Yeah.
to see
It's
it
like the
because of
motorway, isn't it?
distance.
You're
Yeah.
joining at a decent speed, where you join slow and you're going to cause an incident, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially because let's face it, when you serve a long lap, as a racer, your mind is not on, oh, let me just brake here and wait for the rest of the field to come through so I can do this more safely. It's like gap gone. Let's carry on, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I misjudged it.
Oh,
That's the reality. Yeah.
if that was the case, we would never see crashes. We wouldn't see Aldeguer crash in Catalonia. We wouldn't see Frankie miss the long lap penalty loop last time out. It never
Yeah.
happened, would it? Everyone would just be
Yeah,
dawdling.
exactly. Yeah. And we would never have witnessed the greatest long lap ever in Johann Zarco, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got that down for later because I was going to suggest the Omega right-hander, the
Mhm.
in turn three, that downhill where Diogo and Jake collided. What if they did the long lap penalty like that? But it wouldn't be much of a penalty. It would lose like half a
No.
second.
And the problem you will have more so than the last turn is what happened with Diogo
That was rough.
is you're rejoining to turn left and everyone else is going through the turn looking that way. So as soon as they look up, impact for the rider in front. I think it's a lot more opportunity for an accident in that turn than where it is. Yeah.
I think it is the best spot for it, but I do like the idea of having extended and join
Yeah.
onto the
And
straight.
it changes nothing in terms of it doesn't add time on. Yeah, maybe like a tenth at most because you're, taking a longer route of the track. But
But that's fine. Don't get a penalty.
yeah, exactly. Don't get the penalty and equally it is a much safer rejoin into the circuit. But I
It'd be
think
like
a lot of it was camera angle. Um,
yes, you probably are right
yeah,
on that one because it does look a little bit like the Red Bull Ring of Austria's. Well, it would do if you had your new plan, because that also runs quite wide and then you run onto the straight. But even then, when someone's coming off there, it does get a bit hectic because everyone's trying to get
yeah,
that left hand side.
yeah. Everyone's trying to get set up for the kink, which now leads into the first chicane. So, yeah, it's difficult. Unfortunately, this is racing. Racing's dangerous. It has inherent risks, but obviously you want to minimize that as much as possible. Um, and unfortunately, a lot of things you can't plan ahead for. Um, I noticed that in quite a few attempts of long lap, there'll be someone who crashes and almost cleans out the guy doing the long lap, or does clean out. You can't predict for that, and maybe the only way you can change that is if someone does a long lap, you impose a yellow flag for them to do it safely. So it's sort of you can't push yourself to the limit to crash, which was what they were doing with all those crashes. When they investigated Zarco and Savadori
Yeah,
for crashing under the yellow flag. So in essence, when a yellow flag is out, you are supposed to roll off. You're supposed to not be at maximum push. And so if you crash whilst there's a yellow flag, it's seen as though you're not obeying the rules of safety and the rules of the track. So, yeah, they will investigate you and they will penalize you for it as well if it's found out that, you've, not adhered to the caution of the yellow flag. But having been in that type of scenario before, not with our rider crashing, but with him being overtaken under a yellow flag, um, we had an investigation, and it's really interesting to see that side of things, the investigation side of it, and essentially probably why Zarco would have got away with it, and maybe even Lorenzo, is now that they're all LED panels with the yellow flags, it's all dependent on that brief millisecond difference of when the yellow flag is actually displayed to when does the rider then have a sufficient amount of time to see it, register it,
Yeah.
and not, you know, make a mistake or go over the limit. So yeah, it's definitely an eye opener, and we had this discussion before about someone else that it would be interesting to see how they would do in the race direction office.
Yeah, we did talk.
Um, yeah, it's very easy to sit, you know, and I've been guilty as well. It's very easy to sit behind the TV and say they've done this wrong. I'd do better, but reality is in the moment you wouldn't.
No, it's very true,
Yeah.
and I did feel when I saw that the Johan Zarco was under investigation, I thought it was ridiculous because he was closer to turn two than turn one because he was coming out of the corner where he dropped the front like Pecco did, and I thought that would be tremendously harsh if he was given any penalty for that. Thankfully, he didn't, and we're okay with that. But on the other side, I do remember Marquez hitting Crutchlow's bike many years ago in Silverstone. And I've always remembered that, and I've thought, when the yellow flag comes out, just stop. Just chill out. I mean, it happened, was it last year in the Sachsenring, or it might be the year before? But Jack Miller was penalised because he crashed when someone crashed in the Queckenberg corner. But that was another prime example of the yellow flag going up, whilst Jack is already left-hander, lost the front,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's
And
not
you
a
have
penalty.
no rule is perfect because you have to have some kind of leeway involved in it, to accommodate for a rider's reactions, the scenario around how quickly is it seen, what is the situation of the corner, like is it possible to actually see it if it's out of your peripheral and things like that. So yeah, it's difficult, but they are really harsh on it because at the end of the day, what you have to think is it's not just the rider's safety, it's the track marshals as well, who, let's face it, they're in overalls in the gravel with a 170 kilogram bike coming towards them. Yeah, it's a very serious thing. It's a very serious offense, and it will be investigated regardless, even if it's like, yeah, no, that's a no-brainer. He didn't have enough time to see it. They'll still investigate it out of principle.
It's important to do that and keep that consistency because there's one criticism I think we've all had with MotoGP is the consistency in the penalty system. Seems to be a lot better now with Simon Crafar and the team working more cohesively because something I wanted to actually segue quite nicely into here is that did you see that Alvaro Carpe got a long lap penalty for the collision in the Moto3 race?
So I saw he got a long lap penalty in the race,
It was the
for,
collision at turn
yeah,
one. Now,
pushing.
no one crashed,
Yeah,
but Almansa it was, yeah, he
yeah,
pushed Almansa wide. But it seems to be extremely harsh in Moto 3 where that's it. I've warned you once, you've been told, penalty. Moto 2,
yeah,
MotoGP would be a little bit more lenient, which I do agree the Moto 3 boys are feisty, and it is best to, nip it in the bud now before it gets too far. But I did think that was a little bit harsh considering the nature of turn 1 in general. What do you think,
yeah.
though? Do you
I mean,
reckon stay with that perspective of Moto 3 should be punished and Moto 2 and MotoGP should be lenient, or what do you reckon?
well, I mean, that leads to inconsistency, right? As if, let's say, for instance, you could argue under the circumstances that, Rueda was penalized, why wasn't, Senna Aegis? Probably because he got a double long lap for a jump start, but
Yeah.
it's that level of consistency, right? And the move was slightly different. You know, it was through the corner and Jake was trying to stick himself in a place where he probably wasn't going to get away with. Um, but yeah, unusual to see it in a race whilst it's going on. There must have been angles for it to have been undeniably deliberate. But for sure, they try and set a precedent with the Moto 3 that I don't think you can deny that. Because ultimately that's when they're the youngest, least experienced. I mean, by the time they get to Moto 3, they're well experienced compared to the average person, but in it's the nature of the class means that the racing is really tight and close. I mean, it's 15 to 20 riders in the front group for the first 12 laps minimum. And you don't have a lot of room for error for the front person to go down and the next 20 to hit him. So yeah, maybe they are a bit more harsh on them in that regard, to say like, look, you need to understand that there's serious consequences to the little things that you do.
I do think it's a good idea in the concept of teaching them that this is not okay now, because it will form bad habits if you let them go. And we have seen in the past where riders, I remember Johan Zarco in particular from Moto2, he was extremely aggressive when he came to MotoGP. And a lot of people had to talk to him and say, listen, you've got to calm it down a bit. Marco Simoncelli was very aggressive, and he also had the same conversation. So it is possible that riders move up with that sort of little bit of, oh, well, we got away with it in Moto3 or whatever, and maybe not now. So I do
Yeah.
agree with that to a certain degree. But the Moto2 incident is where the penalties, of course, are quite significant. Now, we touched base upon this with Moreira earlier. We agreed quite quickly that the double on lap penalty for Marcos Ramirez, which we'll get to in a minute, and the pit lane start for Moreira. Do you want to just add a bit more context to that?
Yes, I mean, Ramirez, unfortunately, by the looks of it, got out of shape in the braking area, released the brake, but at that point had,
Too
um,
late.
yeah, had the rider in front of him. I cannot for the life of me think who it was that he rode
It was
into.
Arenas.
Arenas, yeah, had Arenas in front of him and tried as much as he could to avoid it, just couldn't. And in those situations when there's like the tiniest bit of panic, you tend to target fix,
Yeah, of
and
course.
you're trying so hard to avoid what's right in front of you that you end up going into it because you can't look anywhere else, kind of thing. And for sure, that's the penalty. And I was explaining this to a friend earlier, why Ramirez was penalized and Agura wasn't. Ultimately, Ramirez crashed into someone himself, causing both of them to crash. He rode into someone is probably more accurate to say, whereas Agura crashed and his bike unfortunately took out Mir. So it's not the same thing. So for sure, that's definitely sufficient punishment in that circumstance. And Ramirez, I got it wrong. He wasn't, throwing his hands up. I think he just sort of was looking around him to say, who am I apologizing to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And was very quick to apologize to Arenas. So fair there. And Moreira, yeah, look, I will risk sticking my neck out a little bit here, because he's received a hell of a lot of hate for that incident, and unwarranted, because for the simple fact that, first things first, he looked behind him. Whether he looked sufficiently enough behind him, you cannot come out and say he's an idiot. He didn't even look behind. He just came straight on the racing line, dawdled along, blah, blah. When he was coming to the point of rejoining, he looked behind and saw Joe Roberts. This is where I go off piste and say, in my opinion, he probably hasn't seen the rest of the riders behind Joe Roberts. He's just seen Joe. He's rejoined onto the track, and it's just a really difficult, awkward place to rejoin. Canet was quick enough to see what was happening and went wide and avoided the whole thing. Alonso unfortunately wasn't. Alonso was still buried underneath the screen, looking at the corner exit, setting himself up for the left. And yeah, Moreira at that point maybe should have continued up on the gravel. The thing is, in retrospect, you can always find an alternative, a safer alternative.
Of course, yeah.
But I think he's been penalized for it because it was a mistake. I'm not denying that, but to say that he's a clueless idiot who just rejoined without a care in the world, it's a bit too far. He definitely looked behind him and he got it wrong. He made a misjudgment, and that can happen to the very best of people. So I think, as far as getting the pitchfork and torches out, I think we should put them away and just, maybe a slap on the wrist, which he's got, a pit lane start from Brno, and, don't, don't do it again, basically. Think a little bit further on. I think he will. I mean, it was a horrendous looking crash. I think the aftermath of no doubt what he's going to probably endure now from the social media warriors is going to make him think twice the next time
Yeah,
that
I
he
totally agree with that.
rejoins. Yeah.
I think my initial reaction was also the same. I text you. Did he even look? Watched it back a few times now. You're bang on. Absolutely, what you said there was perfect. He took one look behind him. Joe Roberts. I think it reminds me a little bit off topic here, but there's a roundabout here in Warrington. You cross the road there, and if there's a big car that swings quite wide, you think it's safe to cross because he's turning left. What you don't realise, there's another car packed right behind him. So by the time that car gone, he drives, and you're like, oh my god, that almost ran me over. That reminded me of that moment where you take a look, Joe Roberts, in that angle where Moreira was, it was so fast. It's like, what, 90 mile an hour, 80 mile an hour through those corners? Not sure, but it's rapid. He would have seen Joe Roberts and thought, right, well, there's no one else behind him. Start moving. By the time he's committed, you can't just reverse. It's over.
Yeah.
Alonso is full into the bubble. He tucked into left-hand side, coming out the mega corner, into the direction. No one can go anywhere. As you say, it was a miracle that Canet seen him, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone would want to kind of just try and understand that situation, is I would say from the moment he made contact, and I stand by what I said, that I don't think he tried to make a pass on Dixon. I think he just, again, misjudged the merging of the two lines. Jake, the whole race, had run a bit wide because there are different lines through that turn, and Diogo was able to hold a tighter line and just, we've seen the overtake there before. If you're going to make that overtake, you give it a little bit of throttle and sort of push the outside guy out to continue the corner, and that's how you make the overtake.
Yeah,
Moreira didn't do that. Yeah, exactly. Moreira didn't do that because I don't think he was anticipating to get his nose chopped off.
He sat up straight away. It shows that he was not committing, because if he was committed, he wouldn't have even looked, because he would have been on the right side.
Exactly.
He'd seen it, picked up, and was like, oh god.
Yeah, and to carry on what I was saying is, I would say that from the moment he hit the gravel to Alonso made contact with him, 5 seconds. So get a stopwatch out and just watch how long 5 seconds is, and then do it again with your head out of a car window, because that's the only way I can sort of illustrate the level of kind of intenseness in your body whilst you're doing something. Yeah,
absolutely determined.
Exactly.
Good result.
Yeah. And then imagine someone's trying to throw you out of that car window, and see how quickly 5 seconds go and how capable you are of doing something. Because ultimately he was running off track, trying to stop himself from crashing, and then think about rejoining. So yeah, it doesn't, I don't think people factor in enough the situation that those riders are in at any given point. I mean, that's probably the closest you could get to understanding what Moreira went through in terms of the amount of time he had to make a decision. Yes, it was the wrong decision. There's no doubt about that. But to give context to it, count for 5 seconds, like I said, with your head out of a car window at 80 kilometers an hour, and someone's trying to throw you out of that car, and see how quick you are to solve a simple equation, let's say, within 5 seconds, with all of that going on.
We don't humanize them enough sometimes. I think we forget that they are human beings that make genuine mistakes, just like you and I would. I'll make a typo in this video or something, or maybe I've said something that's completely incorrect, or the year's wrong. Fine, we can laugh about it. But when you make a mistake like that, you pay massive consequences that we will never really feel that same way. I think we've all had a job where we've balls that we made a big mistake and you've panicked about it. That panic resulted in a crash for Diogo and Alonso, and it just happens. But as you say, that's why there's a penalty involved, so you remember, I won't do that again. If I go off track, and then I'll stay off track, because I don't want to risk that again. And the only way to do that is experiencing it.
Yeah, for sure. And look, this, let's not paint them as complete, as you said, aliens, angelic beings. Reality is, Moreira's speed perception will be there because he's acclimatized to go into those speeds. It's just the circumstance he was in, the near miss contact, in the gravel, adrenaline dump. I've made a mistake. Let me get back on. And I mean, before that, let's not forget, he was having one of the greatest rides I've ever seen. He was 25th and up to 12th by lap 2. Phenomenal. And
It's a real
then,
shame that he didn't stay on
yeah,
today.
in a position to fight for third from 25th on the grid is outstanding. And yeah, hero to zero, unfortunately.
There was a
Yeah.
lot of that today, though. Did you notice? Raisa Yamanaka from
Yeah.
20 something. Tayo Furusato was 18th to like third.
Yeah.
Where did all this come
Manu
from?
Gonzalez was like
Yeah, yeah.
15th to 4th. Yeah. And look, the wet qualifying did a lot of that, and people maybe not getting to Q1 into Q2 immediately, and then having to go through a wet Q1 and not being as strong in the wet. Probably had a lot to do with the kind of up and down grid positions.
That's a good
But
point, actually. I think
you know,
something. If it was a normal qualifier, we probably wouldn't have seen those heroics, let's say,
yeah,
perhaps.
yeah. But what's most impressive about it all is allegedly Sachsenring is a track that you cannot overtake on, and I think that was fully on display
Yeah, I
this
think
weekend.
Diogo
Yeah,
proved us wrong there.
yeah.
Just moving on a little bit then, I think I wrote here about talking about the championship implications for MotoGP, but you know what? I feel like we've kind of covered that, so I'm not going to spend too much time upon this. But regarding the power rankings, the feeling of MotoGP, I don't think what we saw today changed. I think Marquez's 37 points was expected. Pecco didn't find any momentum. Alex didn't lose too much ground. I think we're very much at a status quo where we kind of expected this. You know, are you feeling a momentum shift or any change?
No, not at all. I think Alex and Pecco, on the face of it, will be counting their blessings because they got away. For all intents and purposes, Alex with his injury was hoping for a best P5. That's what the team were expecting. Pecco from 11th,
Top five?
maybe if he had an extraordinary race, a third, which is what he got. But, you know, it was more a case of damage limitation from those two. And with the way the race panned out, it was probably the best result that they could have hoped for, either of them. I think Pecco maybe will be a little bit disappointed in that I genuinely thought Alex was going to drop off, but he didn't, which
Same.
just even more so cements how gutsy of a ride it was. And maybe on that account, Pecco probably thought as well he'd be coming in a little bit closer to Alex. But yeah, it is what it is, and the reality is nobody is on Marc Marquez's level yet. So I don't think any status quo has changed, and if anything, it's got worse because yeah, that was a
Nation.
message. Yeah. A message was very clearly sent out. I mean, look, let's look at things. Fabio was fourth, 10 seconds behind. Mark, was it? I think, or maybe even 16. Like, that's
Well,
insane. Yeah.
especially a
Yeah.
modern era of MotoGP.
Yeah. That's under half a second a lap slower for 30 laps.
And you mentioned earlier, Alex Rins is what 2 seconds slower than what Mark was.
Yeah, at some points. Yeah, I think for the most part, he was around the 1.6 to 1.8 off. But yeah, I think he finished 42 seconds behind or something daft like that.
A lot of
Yeah.
time, isn't it? One
Yeah.
thing I will mention though, because I really do feel it's the status quo, and I don't think we've learned or not learned anything. Well, yeah, I don't think we've really learned anything from this weekend because it's pretty much gone to plan, apart from the crashes of, say, like Digia, Bez, Frankie, which leads me into my next thing. Fourth place battle is heating up in the championship, and I think it might be time to start looking into this because I don't see Marquez slowing down. I see Alex as a perennial second place runner up, and Bagnaia might catch up to second or stay third. But the Italian battle for fourth, as it stands, Craig, is currently Fabio Di Gianantonio in fourth with 142 points. Morbidelli trails his teammate by 3 points with 139, and Bez falls behind by a further 9 behind Frankie with 130 points, all fighting for fourth spot. And guess what? None of them took points today.
Yeah. And look, I think a lot of who finishes fourth is going to come down to who makes the least amount of mistakes, as it
Right.
generally tends to be. Who wins a championship is who's the most consistent. But of those sort of four that you mentioned, you throw in Zarco, throw in Fabio, Quartararo, unless he's already in there. How many races can they finish in the top five is going to determine who finishes fourth. And when they're not in the top five, is it because they're crashing or they're finishing sixth or seventh?
Yeah.
is
Where
is
those
going to be
points
the
going
decider.
missed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But what I
but no,
will
it's super interesting.
it is, especially for the likes of Frankie Morbidelli, who doesn't really get much praise anymore because he does do a lot of silly things. Digia, who is classed as not having a good season, when actually he is. And Bez, all respect, apart from the first 5, 6 races where he was getting the feel of the Aprilia, that's an incredible position to be in.
Yeah, I mean, and let's not skate around the other elephant in that box. Martin was at a point of leaving because the Aprilia was so bad, or contemplating it, or maybe his manager's playing mind games. But the fact remains that discussion was had at some point, and now all of a sudden things have turned around. Bez has just very quietly gone about working on himself on that bike. And yeah, I think we had this discussion before. He kind of, after Silverstone, had the belief in himself that he's deserving of that factory seat. And and I think we're going to see a very different Aprilia from previous iterations, in that if they stick with Bez and go down his route, I think it's going to progress a lot more than what was before. Because I think before, Aprilia kind of delivered a really good package but couldn't push it on. Whereas now what we've seen is the package wasn't there, but they've managed to develop it. So it's sort of almost polar opposite from the years before.
I think a changing thing for me will be when we get to those tracks that aren't considered Aprilia worthy or good for Aprilia in any shape or form. We need to see some strong results, even if worst case scenario is the top five. Take
Yeah,
the points when available and trying to maximise. But this sets it up quite nicely because you mentioned Jorge Martin there. What's next is Brno, and allegedly there's a world champion from 2024 coming back to Aprilia. So first and foremost, then Aprilia, Brno. Don't recall seeing how well they did there. Don't particularly think they did any good, especially not back in 2020. But will Martin be there? It's confirmed, but will he be there?
I think 100% he will be there. How much of the weekend he does is dependent on the medical team and maybe Martin's um, feedback to the medical team. There are two ways you can be declared unfit. One is you genuinely are, and the doctor can see it visibly. The other is the doctor has no problem, but you do, and you say, "Look, uh, maybe just sign me off," kind of thing, you know. Um, so I think it will be there for sure. How much he does, I think, from what I heard, the San Marino test went very well. Aprilia are very happy. Martin's very happy with the GP25, because let's not forget, he hasn't really ridden it that much. So maybe all the time away from it and all the speculation and everything was he'd forgot what it was capable of, or just maybe didn't think it was capable of anything. So Bruno, you think about it as a track, I think it's got the potential for a good Aprilia result. But the problem is, I think the KTM's are going to go a little bit better. It all depends on the surface. If it's the same surface it has been for when KTM were there last, I think the KTM's are going to be strong. And then the problem is with Aprilia, they're fighting the six Ducatis. Let's call it two or three KTM's, depending on if Vinales is good to come back. And they, unfortunately, I just don't see him going well at this point in time. And then throw in a Fabio, throw in a Zarco if it's wet or dry. He's been doing all right. It becomes a lot harder task for the Aprilias to do well, and all of those things factor in. So for sure, they have the potential to go well. Um, I think a lot of Bez's results have come from a good qualifying position. Once he's marred in the pack, he can't ride it's the same as the Yamaha. They can't ride the way they need to get the most out of the package. So let's see how qualifying goes. I think Aprilia got an opportunity. I think KTM are going to be a dark horse, but in saying that, they're probably not now because, why not? It's just been one of those years for KTM.
It has, doesn't it? Every single time there seems to be a cloud, it's not cleared anything up. It's brought more rain, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I
But the
mean,
thing is, sorry, mate, go
this
on.
weekend they were looking good and they ended up with one rider not showing up with appendicitis, one writing himself off in practice, and then Pedro crashing. I think he crashed out of both races, no? Oh no, he
Yes,
made a mistake
he
in the
ran
sprint.
off in the sprint, yeah,
Yeah.
but then didn't finish in the points, I don't believe.
And so, yeah, there you go. I mean, the BT commentary was saying, oh, look at Brad in seventh. He's the highest placed KTM. And I was like, yeah, he's the only placed KTM. That's, that's
What's
the
worse is
reality of KTM.
I said that Vinales has made the podium this weekend, which I do
Yeah,
feel would have been a good call if he
for
hadn't got
sure.
hurt. He
Yeah.
does do
I
well
think
there.
the only two, the only other two who had anything for Mark, I'm not saying they would have challenged him, but at least were there to maybe make a go of it, were Maverick and Digi. In the wet Bez, for sure, but in the
Yeah.
dry, Maverick and Digi, yeah.
My one concern for Bez and the Aprilia is that noticing from the previous rounds we've had, Dutch TT have asked, and even the Silverstone as well, the Aprilia is not strong on getting out of the corners, especially not compared to the Marquez's of the world of the Ducati GP25s, because of what you were saying earlier, that pick up out of the corners. It gets swamped. It gets pretty much eaten up on the straights. It just on the brakes. It survives. Would he be able to survive around 20 laps of Brno? Tough ask. Horsepower hill, where you need the really beast of a bike, could be a challenge for Aprilia, and I think it's going to be very difficult for Martin.
Well, for sure. And again, it's, where the Aprilia makes its time up is, like you said, it's not on the corner exit, it's through the corner. If there's a rider in front of you, that's a problem because you can only go as fast as the person in front of you. But if someone's not in front, then what we saw this race with Alex behind Bez, um, was they couldn't get past Bez. They really
Yeah,
struggled because he was so fast through the corner that the Ducatis had to slow going into it, um, slow down more than anticipated, and then lost the momentum on the exit. And by then that was just enough because the straights were short enough for the Ducatis not to power past the Aprilia. And I think Brno's like that as well. Although it's much more spread out than the Sachsenring, the straights aren't very long. They're not,
quick squirts, aren't they? Quick bursts.
yeah, they're not Ducati strength or KTM strength, top end corners.
If all goes well, we see Martin. He has a good result. He's happy. Do you think there's a chance of reconciliation between him and Aprilia? Maybe we
I
don't
think
part
so.
ways. Maybe we just say, you know what, put it all behind us. Let's get together. We've got another season to do it.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very unusual circumstance, and I don't really know what to make of it. I think that Martin's manager has maybe used the situation more than it was intended to get maybe a better deal out of Aprilia, maybe to get a massive offer from Honda. Because let's not forget, Aleix is very good friends with Martin and pretty much got Martin into Aprilia. I'm not saying Martin's performance wasn't good enough, but
I didn't say
Aleix
so.
was the bridge between the two. And now Aleix is at Honda. So, Honda have always said that they would love to have Martin so long as he's not under contract. And Aprilia have always said he is under contract until next year. So, and now it seems to have quietened down and it's basically, yeah, Martin will be with Aprilia next year.
I'm beginning to think so because from being to the point where all this conversation, Massimo Rivola won't talk about the Aprilia, he won't talk about Martin's situation. Honda's, of course, as you say, we won't take a rider out of contract. It did begin to look like maybe this is falling through. And also, Honda's performance hasn't blown anyone away since we saw them starting improving. They're still improving. They've still got a lot of work to go. So I do think we could see Martin come back, enjoy himself with the Aprilia, feel a little bit more stronger on it. But also, I give him respect because at the end of the day, we've never been in that situation where you're sitting at home watching your peers race. And I bet you it is tough, and I bet you there's thoughts and everything running through your head about, oh, maybe this is the wrong decision, maybe I've got cold feet now, or maybe... So I think it can be something that can be reconciled, and they can develop a partnership again. Just will it? Maybe we see the beginning of it today. Is it next week or the week after? Next week, I think.
Yeah, next week, yeah. Double header, yeah.
So
and also look, the reality is, let's look at it. Martin goes to Honda. Who's to say he's going to do anything on it?
exactly.
Nobody else has apart from Zarco. And let's put into perspective. Aleix, yes, has lost maybe that final 2% of bite of risk everything for the result as a test rider now. But Aleix is doing nothing on that Honda in comparison to where he finished on the Aprilia. I don't think that Honda is suitable to Martin's riding style. I think Zarco's figured something out with it that is starting to pay off for the other riders because they're starting to come good now. But Zarco's the leading light there. And I don't see Martin beating Zarco on the Honda, at least next year anyway.
I agree. I don't think it's the right decision. I think he should stay and see what can be done. But since we are returning back, like Martin's returning as well, we will be returning back to the Czech Republic Grand Prix of Brno. Fun question for you, and for the viewers watching at home or listening, wherever you may be. Zarco's pole time in Brno many, many years ago, 2020, on the Avinci Ducati, was the 1:55.687. What sort of lap times do you think we'll be seeing this weekend? Or next weekend, depending when you're watching.
I mean, so much has progressed since, hasn't it? Look, maybe a safe guess, high 53, 53.8, 53.9 in qualifying. I think it's not out of the question to drop a second from what Zarco did, realistically, maybe more. Because Zarco on a vintage Ducati, which was not the greatest, is probably not representative of what the peak at that time in terms of bike and rider performance was.
That was a GP19.
Or capability. Yeah.
So we've seen 6 iterations of the Desmond Sedici since then.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for sure it's got a hell of a lot better. But it's always strange, you think in these situations, oh yeah, they'll go like 2-3 seconds quicker, and it's like 0.2. It's not sometimes as much as you think, because sometimes that just is the limit of what's possible.
And sometimes some tracks can yield massive results.
Yeah.
Like new grips and new surface levels. Because I think I seen a post a while ago. It was a picture of Bagnaia from one track into another, and he found 5 seconds. That's what we found over the years. But again, a lot of it is just new surfaces, new track layouts, maybe new things. It's not as simple as just, it's another year, we're going faster. But I'm generally curious, so let me know in the comments. I will go softly. I want to say a low 53. I'm going to say we'll see a low 53. So it's almost 2 seconds quicker. Well, it is 2 seconds quicker, so we'll see. But I thought that'd be a fun little question to ask, and we'll revisit this.
Yeah, when I knew we hadn't been to Brno in a while, but when you said a vintage Ducati, it was like, wow, we really haven't been there in a long time.
2020 was the year of rookie Brad Binder, who won in KTM, with KTM on KTM's first victory. Rossi was still racing, Petrucci, Dovizioso, Vinales was on the Yamaha before it all went wrong. Morbidelli was on the Petronas Yamaha. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, Johan Zarco's incredible long-lap penalty in the stadium section in turn 8. Paul Espargaro was involved in that collision on board the KTM.
Yeah.
The year after Zarco split with KTM as well. So there's a lot of history there to revisit. And I'm really
for
curious.
Sure. And I mean, it is probably one of the current, like more recent generation historical tracks, alongside Valencia or along those lines kind of thing. Maybe Valencia is a bit older, but Brno is a historical circuit within the MotoGP calendar, you know?
It's iconic.
Um,
It's classic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Probably a bit older than Qatar, but yeah, on par with that.
So I'm going to chuck a few things out here. You've already mentioned Enea Bastianini. He actually won the Moto2 race there back in 2020.
Hmm.
Ayagura was on the podium in Moto3.
Right.
And I guess a couple of things we could look at was the podium from there, which was Brad Binder, Morbidelli second, and I think it was Zarco third. Are you going to go out on a limb and predict a top three for a returning Brno?
Return to Brno. Um, I'm gonna really go out on a limb and say Mark will win.
Okay.
Um,
Didn't think too long
no,
of that one, did
yeah, nothing to do with previous form or anything like that. Yeah, I think Mark's gonna win if it's dry. Brno does have a tendency to throw up a bit of rain here and there.
If it rains, it's Zarco. It's like Cal
Yeah,
Crutchlow back in
100%.
2016.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and just because I mentioned KTM, if Vinales is fully fit, Vinales for a podium. If not, probably Pedro. I want to say Brad, but he's just had one of those seasons so far where
Unforgettable.
it's nothing against him. It's just not gone for him. So yeah,
Yeah. I miss seeing Brad at the sharp end. That's that braking style, throwing it into the corners. It's something we are missing as a fan base.
I actually took me a little bit aback today watching him because I was just like, oh, how how is that? And I was like, oh yeah, it's Brad. That's why. That's just how he rides. So, yeah, into turn one was spectacular.
Like a madman, isn't he? I think he was
Yeah,
alongside Miller and Marini at one point. I was like, oh, it's going to end in tears. This.
yeah,
He didn't, and
and
he had it under
doesn't.
control.
Yeah, he's just completely organized chaos, I guess, is how you could describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to join you on. I'm going to make a limb. I'm going to go out on a limb as well. Of course, let me know in the comment section down below wherever you may be watching this from. But I have a sneaky suspicion Quattararo is going to do well this weekend. I think he's going to get clear, do the good lap time he needs, because again, Brno is sometimes favours the Yamahas because those tight, twisty sections. The Schwantz corner and Horsepower Hill might be difficult, but I'll chuck Quattararo up there, maybe third, and I think I'd just go for maybe Mark and Bagnaia. Would really like to see again Vinales if he's healthy, I'm thinking. Maybe it's too much to wish for a KTM up there, but if it rains, I'll take Zarco, our Marquez, because the by far superior for that one. But yeah, I guess that's about it then, mate. So I think I'll just ask a little fun trivia question because we are quite getting quite late here in the UK. Little fun question for you then, Craig. Don't know if you watched my recent KneeDown video where I talked about world champions on the MotoGP grid. No, fair play to you. Fair play. You've been very busy for the past 2 weeks, so I can give you 3 weeks, yeah, because we haven't seen you in a while, have we? Because you've been away. But question for you: how many world champions are on the MotoGP grid today? MotoGP world champions, Moto2 and Moto3. How many?
Oh, so if they were
Just world
one
champions.
in old categories.
You can name them if you like, or just give a number. It's entirely up to you.
I think there's probably only like a handful who haven't won a championship. In that Chantra definitely hasn't. Agura has.
Do you want me to count as you go through the names?
Yeah. I mean, so obviously both Marquez brothers, Pecco, Martin, if you want to count him as on the grid. Uh, Brad didn't win a title. Or did he win Moto 3?
If you get
Don't
that
deal with
wrong, you'll
pressure.
kick
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, of all the ones to get wrong.
South
Um,
African pride.
yeah, just memory escapes me at this point with
It's
that.
not easy when you've
Mir,
been chucked on the
yeah,
spot, is it?
yeah. Mir's one, Marini's one.
Ooh,
Uh,
Marini?
didn't he win Moto 2?
I'm aware of.
Pretty sure he did.
Sadly not. Second place was his best finish.
Ah, I'm thinking of Pecco. That's the other thing as well, is I'm thinking of like the liveries and who they rode for.
I
and thinking
appreciate I
of,
caught you. Yeah, because that was
yeah,
they had the same livery, didn't he? But I do
yeah.
appreciate I've asked you on this very like 9:30 at night.
But I mean, all right, let's say if there's 22 on the grid, I'll go with 18.
Little bit too many.
Yeah.
Oh, should I? If you haven't seen the video, go and check it out. But I am about to spoil it, so if you want to go and check out my video, go and check it out. It's called "This Many Champions of the Grid" or something like that. Of course, I'll put it somewhere. But it's actually 13 world champions on the current MotoGP grid. Now, every single rider, barring Somket Chantra, unfortunately, has finished at least runner-up or third in the championship. So you were very close. Like every single rider on that grid has been that close to winning a world championship.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of it you think, I know they were in contention for the title. I just can't remember if they won the title.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Brad
Yeah.
Binder, 2016. You know this, Moto3
Yeah.
world champion.
Moto3 world champion.
That
Yeah.
was the
Didn't
year where he
win
won from Jerez at the
Moto2.
back of the grid,
Yeah. Just didn't win the Moto2 championship.
which he was close though. He was a
Yeah,
runner-up.
definitely. He was there. He was there fighting for it. Um, yeah. Yeah.
So
I'll get some flack for that.
and final couple of questions as well, just before we finish up. Riders coming to MotoGP next season. Top right Razgatlioglu. Talk about Martin, which we have discussed already. Do you have any other predictions that could happen for next season? Not just MotoGP, but Moto3, Moto2, or even World Superbike? Because there's a lot of connections at the minute about Sean Weir's group trying to chase the likes of Aaron Canet, some Moto2 youngsters. Any
Yeah. I
ideas
mean,
or any predictions?
well, Bulliger's definitely set the precedent, hasn't he? In the precedent in that he was, for all intents and purposes, a failed Moto2 rider. Not really failed, more like couldn't get a seat in GP. And went to World Superbike and is now challenging Top Rack, which is no easy feat. Um, I think maybe is the only interesting one in that he might leave. I think that could be a route for Jake Dixon if he doesn't, if the GP seat doesn't materialize. I think the reality is sooner or later you run out of time to get the MotoGP seat. So I think Jake's approaching that. I think Joe Roberts is approaching that. They're still very young. It's not to say that they're getting old, but the reality is younger and younger people are coming up underneath you.
Yeah.
And would you rather give someone with maybe 2 years tops a shot or someone with 10 years? There's definitely a more sound investment there. As far as MotoGP, I can't see Chantra staying there next year, but I don't see an alternative to replace him. So difficult one, because obviously the whole premise behind that team is for an Asian rider to be with him, and I don't see anyone in the Moto2 field able to make that step up. I have heard, though, I think it was in your Discord, that Hakeem Danish will be going to the Moto3 team next year with Pertamina.
Okay.
Forgive me if I'm butchering his name, but one of the Red Bull rookies. But he has to finish within the top three this year because he's 17 next year.
Right, so he's got a bit of a clause.
Yeah. So if he doesn't, they can't move him up because he's not 18.
Got you, got you.
And then Rosata will go up to Moto2, from what I heard.
Nice.
I don't know who, maybe alongside Aji. But yeah, other than that, I don't see many other new people coming in or leaving. Manu Gonzalez for sure will be there in MotoGP. Where, I don't know. He tested for Trackhouse, didn't he? And
Did all right
good.
as well.
Yeah, he didn't do too badly. He didn't embarrass himself at all. I think maybe he could replace the moral champion, Fernandez.
I forgot about that
Um,
nickname.
yeah, maybe, yeah. But other than that, no. It's been a weird season in that there's been so much talk about so many people going and so many people leaving, and yet nothing really has materialized as of yet. I think maybe after, when does the summer break kick in? I think is it
Not
after
much. It's like 3
Yeah,
weeks. It's just for 3 weeks after this one, I think, or after what's the one after this one? Catalonia, Austria.
Australia. Yeah,
It is. So it's after this one. We have a little bit of a break to the 15th of August, where we return to the Red Bull Ring of Austria.
yeah. So maybe come Austria, we'll have a lot more concrete uh, offers in
I
place.
predict that once one rider falls, the
Yeah,
rest will. And
yeah,
I keep hearing that Pedro Acosta is going to go to Ducati. I keep hearing that Jorge Martin's going to the Honda, which we've discussed. I keep hearing Aaron Canet's going over to World Superbike with BMW Motorrad. And I've also heard that Dennis Onchu's moving to MotoGP, but I have no idea for whom.
yeah. I
Would Prima
think
Prama entertain a double Turkish team? Would that help their finances? Having
maybe
possible?
the only way I see Dennis going to to MotoGP is in place of Bastianini, and it or is then all dependent on where Bastianini goes. Maybe he goes to Aprilia if Martin went to Honda. And again, it's like that. It's one of those where,
Musical chairs again.
yeah, exactly. I think as bad as Bastianini's year has been in KTM, I don't think he wants to risk not having another year um, with him rather than having no ride at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of it is dependent on who else is going where else. I heard as well that I heard Petrucci to take Bautista's seat
I also heard
and
that.
Johnny Ray to take Petrucci's seat.
Interesting. I've also
Yeah,
heard Johnny Ray to BMW as well, so that's a new
yeah.
one.
Well, he seems to be following Top Rack, doesn't he? Just
Yeah.
in reverse. Yeah. Um,
That'll be
but yeah, I
interesting, that.
mean, we'll have to see what happens. I don't see Scott Redding being in the paddock next year either.
I think he'll go back to BSB, won't he?
Yeah.
Is the Mark VDS team going to have two bikes next season? Have I imagined that?
I don't know, but I was
I
really
thought I heard that.
surprised to find out that they are huge. They're not just, they have a world car endurance team I don't think it's the prototypes. I think it's the one just below the LMP2s. Um, then they have their own world endurance bike team, which is the Yamaha R1.
Yes, yes.
Then they have their Moto2 team and now the World Superbike team. So they are not a small independent outfit.
Yeah,
They're a
Mark van der
massive
Straat is
thing.
loaded.
Yeah. 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 Really surprised by that. I saw the brown red in World Car Endurance. I thought, what? Hang on a minute.
I recognise that lion or
Yeah,
whatever
I've
it may
seen it
be.
somewhere. Yeah.
The one thing I will
But
mention actually regarding Dennis Onchu, the reason why I think this is actually plausible is that for the Turkish audience, because Top Rack's going to bring a hell of a lot of interest, we might even see Istanbul return to MotoGP. I think it's going to be that prominent. But a lot of talks of Rueda taking Onchu's seat. So maybe if then they can slot him into MotoGP, they would continue that IO project. Maybe.
yeah,
And
I
he's winning
think
races and he's looking good, so maybe it's not a bad idea after all.
yeah, I think he is looking good. And look, it's a really awkward one in that you could say both ways, right? You could confidently say he needs another year. He's just got there this year. Give him another year to make a go for it. Equally, it could go horribly wrong and he misses his opportunity
Yes, like Joe
in
Roberts, for
staying
example.
another year. Yeah, exactly. So I think when the opportunity presents itself, you have to grab it with both fists. But the reality is, who does he replace? I don't see Pramac getting rid of both riders unless there is a ridiculous amount of money from the Turkish sports ministry. That's
Could
the only
happen,
way
yeah.
I see it being a double Turkish lineup, which or a private business owner in Turkey maybe, and it's all promoted towards getting Turkey back on the map. Maybe I see that happening, but realistically, probably take Bastianini's seat if it's available.
Then it could fall into place quite seamlessly, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
It's an
because he
interesting
is
one.
also a Red Bull athlete, isn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So I think there's a lot of food for thought there, and I think for the viewers, it's definitely something I'd like you guys to answer as well. So let me know in the comment section down below if you have any questions for both me or Craig. You know where to find us. But I think that's it, mate. So massive thanks for your time. Really enjoyed this. Apologies I've kept you quite late.
Yeah, getting there, getting older.
It's just gone 2 a.m., ladies and gentlemen. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But yeah,
No.
any last thoughts, mate? But yeah, really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, it's always great to be here and great to talk. It was a little bit disappointing, really, the main race, if we're being honest. Lots of talking points and a lot to dive into, but yeah, it doesn't sell interest, does it? Seeing someone that dominant, people soon get bored of that pretty quickly. But Moto 2 and Moto 3 were exceptional. And shout out to David Munoz, who we made the conversation about riders being spoken to or someone having a word. And I don't know whether someone did that or the penny finally dropped, but David Munoz realized that he doesn't have to overtake 300 times a lap for 30 laps to win a race. And just bided his time and made some still pretty authentic David Munoz overtakes, but won the race and very impressive. Maybe this is the turning point for him to move on and become the polished rider that he has potential to be.
Maturity finds a way, and it does look like it's working. From the first victory to now, I think I've always rated him as a rider. I've always thought he was fantastic, but just a bit too
Yeah,
eager. But
eager for sure.
yeah, but I actually, quick apology to you because I forgot to put that into our segment here today because I know you want to speak about him today. But one thing I will end off on a beautiful gesture from the Moto2 riders and Moto3 riders for Borja Gomez. Thought that was absolutely lovely. Um, yeah, and
Very
the
nice.
team from us.
Yeah, I mean, a lot. My partner was asking me, is it, kind of like, did they know him sort of thing? And the reality is a lot of them did. He did race in the Moto2 World Championship, but also he's part of the Pacosta Riders Academy. And a lot of guys go there to train. They're not necessarily members of it, but they use the facilities in the off season. So he was very well known within the MotoGP paddock, within most paddocks, and was not just an exceptional talent on a bike, but from everything I've heard, and I didn't know him, unfortunately, is a really lovely person. Always had a smile on his face and just very humble, very easy to talk to.
Yeah, I certainly got that impression from watching some of the stuff, the way he conducted himself in interviews and things like that. And I was touched to see the riders giving that spotlight to Borja Gomez. So yeah, even from us at KneeDown, even yourself, of course, respects go to Borja and the family. But yeah, that was a nice way to top off the podium celebrations, in my opinion. But I think we will top off our podium celebrations of today's KneeDown podcast. So Craig, absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you for joining me again. Can't wait to speak to you next. Will we get you back for Brno possibly, or are you out?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I'm away now for 2 weeks again. So let me see what I can work up. It all depends on what the travel situation is.
Yeah, no pressure,
Yeah.
but myself and for the viewers, I'm sure we would like to see you back again. But yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to KneeDown. Guys, thanks for watching. Ciao for now.